Resuming page 84, where I left off. People say it must not be a great posting here at the mines, says Herr Seidler. They say, wouldn't you rather be in Berlin or France? Wouldn't you rather be a captain at the front, watching the lines advance away from all this soot? But I tell them I live at the center of it all. I tell them this is where the fuel is coming from, the steel too. This is the furnace of the country. Werner clears his throat. We act in the interest of peace. It is verbatim a sentence he and Jutta heard on Deutschlandsender radio 3 days before. In the interest of the world. Herr Seidler laughs. Again, Werner is impressed with how numerous and tiny his teeth are. You know the greatest lesson of history? It's that history is whatever the victors say it is. That's the lesson. Whoever wins, that's who decides the history. We act in our own self-interest. Of course we do. Name me a person or nation who does not. The trick is figuring out where your interests are. A single slice of cake remains. The radio purrs and the woman laughs, and Herr Seidler looks almost nothing, Werner decides, like his neighbors. Their guarded, anxious faces, faces of people accustomed to watching loved ones disappear every morning into the pits. His face is clean and committed. He is a man supremely confident in his privileges. And 5 yards away kneels this woman with varnished fingernails, and hairless calves. A woman so entirely removed from Werner's previous experience that it is as if she is from a different planet, as if she has stepped out of the big Filco itself. Good with tools, Herr Seidler's saying. Smart beyond your years. There are places for boys like you. General Heismeyer's schools, best of the best. Teach the mechanical sciences, too. Code breaking, rocket propulsion, all the latest. Werner doesn't know where to set his gaze. We do not have money. That's the genius of these institutions. They want the working classes, laborers, boys who aren't stamped by, Herr Seidler frowns, middle-class garbage, the cinemas and so forth. They want industrious boys, exceptional boys. Yes, sir. Exceptional, he repeats, nodding, talking as if only to himself. He gives a whistle and the lance corporal returns, helmet in hand. The soldier's eyes flit to the remaining piece of cake and then away. There's a recruiting board in Essen, Herr Seidler is saying. I'll write you a letter. And take this. He hands Werner 75 marks, and Werner tucks the bill into his pocket as quickly as he can. The corporal laughs. Looked like it burned his fingers. Herr Seidler's attention is somewhere else. I will send Heismeyer a letter, he repeats. Good for us, good for you. We act in the interest of the world, eh? He winks. Then the corporal gives Werner a curfew pass and shows him out. Werner walks home oblivious to the rain, trying to absorb the immensity of what has happened. 9 herons stand like flowers in the canal beside the coking plant. A barge sounds its outcast horn, and coal cars trundle to and fro, and the regular thudding of the hauling machine reverberates through the gloom. At Children's House, everyone has been put to bed. Frau Elena sits just inside the entryway with a mountain of laundered stockings in her lap and a bottle of kitchen sherry between her feet. Behind her, at the table, Jutta watches Werner with electric intensity. Frau Elena says, "What did he want?" "He only wanted me to fix the radio." "Nothing more?" "No." "Did they have questions about you or the children?" "No, Frau Elena." Frau Elena lets out a huge breath, as if she has not exhaled these past 2 hours. Dieu merci! She rubs her temples with both hands. You can go to bed now, Jutta, she says. Jutta hesitates. I fixed it, says Werner. That's a good boy, Werner. Frau Elena takes a long pull of sherry, and her eyes close, and her head rocks back. We saved you some supper. Jutta walks up the stairs. She walks to the stairs, uncertainty in her eyes. In the kitchen, everything looks coal-stained and cramped. Frau Elena brings a plate. On it sits a single boiled potato cut in two. Thank you, says Werner. The taste of the cake is still in his mouth. The pendulum swings on and on in the old grandfather clock. The cake, the whipped cream, the thick carpet, the pink fingernails and long calves of Frau Seidler. These sensations whirl through Werner's head as if on a carousel. He remembers towing Jutta to pit 9, where their father disappeared evening after evening, as if their father might come shuffling out of the elevators. Light, electricity, ether, space, time, mass. Heinrich Hertz's Principles of Mathematics, Heismeyer's famous school. Code breaking, rocket propulsion, all the latest. Open your eyes, the Frenchman on the radio used to say, and see what you can with them before they close forever. Werner? Yes, Frau? Aren't you hungry? Frau Elena, as close to a mother as he will ever have. Werner eats, though he is not hungry. Then he gives her the 75 marks, and she blinks at the amount and gives 50 back. Upstairs, after he has heard Frau Elena go to the toilet and climb into her own bed, and the house has become utterly quiet, Werner counts to 100. Then he rises from his cot and takes the little shortwave radio out of the first aid box. 6 years old and bristling with his modifications, replacement wires, a new solenoid, Jutta's notations orbiting the tuning coil, and carries it into the alley behind the house and crushes it with a brick. Exodus. Parisians continue to press through the gates. By 1 a.m., the gendarmes have lost control, and no trains have arrived or departed in over 4 hours. Marie-Laure sleeps on her father's shoulder. The locksmith hears no whistles, no rattling couplings, no trains. At dawn, he decides it will be better to go on foot. They walk all morning. Paris thins steadily into low houses and standalone shops broken by long strands of trees. Noon finds them picking their way through deadlocked traffic on a new motorway near Vaucresson, a full 10 miles west of their apartment, as far from home as Marie-Laure has ever been. At the crest of a low hill, her father looks over his shoulder. Vehicles are backed up as far as he can see. Carryalls and vans, a sleek new cloth-top wraparound V12 wedged between 2 mule carts. Some cars with wooden axles, some run out of gasoline, some with households of furniture strapped to the roof. A few with entire bristling farmyards crammed into trailers, chickens and pigs in cages, cows clumping alongside, dogs panting against the windshields. The entire procession slogs past at little more than walking speed. Both lanes are clogged. Everyone staggers west, away. A woman bicycles wearing dozens of costume necklaces. A man tows a leather armchair on a handcart. A black kitten cleaning itself on the center cushion. Women push baby carriages crammed with china, bird cages, crystalware. A man in a tuxedo walks along calling, "For the love of God, let me through," though no one steps aside, and he moves no more quickly than anyone else. Marie-Laure stays at her father's hip with her cane in her fist. With each step, another disembodied question spins around her. How far to Saint-Germain? Is there food, Auntie? Who has fuel? She hears husbands yelling at wives. She hears that a child has been run over by a truck on the road ahead. In the afternoon, a trio of airplanes races past, loud and fast and low, and people crouch where they walk, and some scream and others clamber into the ditch and put their faces in the weeds. By dusk, they are west of Versailles. Marie-Laure's heels are bleeding and her stockings are torn, and every 100 steps she stumbles. When she declares that she can walk no further, her father carries her off the road, traveling uphill through mustard flowers until they reach a field a few 100 yards from a small farmhouse. The field has been mowed only halfway, the cut hay left unraked and unbaled, as though the farmer has fled in the middle of his work. From his rucksack, the locksmith produces a loaf of bread and some links of white sausage, and they eat these quietly, and then he lifts her feet into his lap. In the gloaming to the east, he can make out a gray line of traffic, herded between the edges of the road. The thin and stupefied bleating of automobile horns. Someone calls as if to a missing child, and the wind carries the sound away. Is something on fire, Papa? Nothing is on fire. I smell smoke. He pulls off her stockings to inspect her heels. In his hands, her feet are light as birds. What is that noise? Grasshoppers. Is it dark? Getting there now. Where will we sleep? Here. Are there beds? No, ma chérie. Where are we going, Papa? The director has given me the address of someone who will help us. Where? A town called Évreux. We're going to see a man named Monsieur Jeannot. He's a friend of the museum's. How far is Évreux? It will take us 2 years of walking to get there. She seizes his forearm. I'm teasing Marie. Évreux is not so far. If we find transportation, we'll be there tomorrow. You will see. She manages to stay quiet for a dozen heartbeats. Then she says, but for now we will sleep. With no beds? With the grass as our beds? You might like it. In Évreux, will we have beds, Papa? I expect so. What if he does not want us to stay there? He will want us. What if he does not? Then we will go visit my uncle, your great-uncle, in Saint-Malo. Uncle Etienne? You said he was crazy. He's partially crazy, yes. He is maybe 76% crazy. She does not laugh. How far is Saint-Malo? Enough questions, Marie. Monsieur Jeannot will want us to stay in Évreux, in big, soft beds. How much food do we have, Papa? Some. Are you still hungry? I'm not hungry. I want to save the food. Okay, let's save the food. Let's be quiet now and rest. She lies back. He lights another cigarette. 6 to go. Bats dive and swoop through the clouds of gnats, and the insects scatter and reform once more. We are mice, he thinks, and the sky swirls with hawks. You are very brave, Marie-Laure. The girl has already fallen asleep. The night darkens. When his cigarette is gone, he eases Marie-Laure's feet to the ground and covers her with her coat and opens the rucksack. By touch, he finds his case filled with woodworking tools. Tiny saws, tacks, gouges, carving chisels, fine gridded sandpapers. Many of these tools were his grandfather's. From beneath the lining of the case, he withdraws a small bag made of heavy linen and cinched with a drawstring. All day, he has restrained himself from checking on it. Now he opens the bag and upends its contents into his palm. In his hand, the stone is about the size of a chestnut. Even at this late hour, in the quarter light, it glows a majestic blue, strangely cold. The director said there would be 3 decoys. Added to the real diamond, that makes 4. One would stay behind at the museum. 3 others would be sent in 3 different directions. One south with a young geologist, another north with the chief of security, and one is here, in a field west of Versailles, inside the tool case of Daniel Leblanc, principal locksmith for the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. 3 fakes, 1 real. It is best, the director said, that no man knows whether he carries the real diamond or a reproduction. And everyone, he said, giving them each a grave look, should behave as if he carries the real thing. The locksmith tells himself that the diamond he carries is not real. There's no way the director would knowingly give a tradesman a 133-carat diamond and let him walk out of Paris with it. And yet, as he stares at it, he cannot keep his thoughts from the question, could it be? He scans the field. Trees, sky, hay, darkness falling like velvet. Already a few pale stars. Marie-La breathes the measured breath of sleep. Everyone should behave as if he carries the real thing. The locksmith reties the stone inside the bag and slips it back into his rucksack. He can feel its tiny weight there, as though he has slipped it inside his own mind. A knot. Hours later, he wakes to see the silhouette of an airplane blot stars as it hurtles east. It makes a soft, tearing sound as it passes overhead. Then it disappears. The ground concusses a moment later. A corner of the night sky, beyond a wall of trees, blooms red. In the lurid, flickering light, he sees that the airplane was not alone, that the sky teems with them, a dozen swooping back and forth, racing in all directions. And in a moment of disorientation, he feels that he is looking not up, but down, as though a spotlight has been shined into the wedge of bloodshot water, and the sky has become the sea, and the airplanes are hungry fish, harrying their prey in the dark. Book 2, 8th of August, 1944. Saint Malo. Doors soar away from their frames. Bricks transmute into powder. Great, distending clouds of chalk and earth and granite spout into the sky. All 12 bombers have already turned and climbed and realigned high above the channel before roof slates, blown into the air, finish falling into the streets. Flames scamper up walls. Parked automobiles catch fire, as do curtains and lampshades and sofas and mattresses and most of the 20,000 volumes in the public library. The fires pool and strut. They flow up the sides of the ramparts like tides. They splash into alleys, over rooftops, through a car park. Smoke chases dust. Dust chases smoke. A newsstand floats, burning. From cellars and crypts through the city, Maloans send up oaths. Lord God, safeguard this town. Its people don't overlook us in your name. Please, amen. Old men clutch hurricane lamps. Children shriek. Dogs yowl. In an instant, 400-year-old beams in row houses are ablaze. One section of the old city, tucked against the western walls, becomes a firestorm in which the spires of flames at their highest reach 300 feet. The appetite for oxygen is such that objects heavier than house cats are dragged into the flames. Stop signs swing toward the heat from their brackets. A potted hedge comes sliding across the rubble and capsizes. Swifts, flushed from chimneys, catch fire and swoop like blown sparks out over the ramparts and extinguish themselves in the sea. On the Rue de la Crosse, the Hotel of Bees becomes almost weightless for a moment, lifted in a spiral of flame before it begins to rain in pieces back to the earth. Number 4, Rue Vaupéral. Marie-La curls into a ball beneath her bed with the stone in her left fist and the little house in her right. Nails in the timber shriek and sigh. Bits of plaster and brick and glass cascade onto the floor, onto the model city on the table, and onto the mattress above her head. Papa, 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 Marie-La is saying, but her body seems to have detached itself from her voice, and her words make a faraway, desolate cadence. The notion occurs to her that the ground beneath Saint-Malo has been knitted together all along by the root structure of an immense tree located at the center of the city, in a square no one ever walked or to, and the massive tree has been uprooted by the hand of God, and the granite is coming with it, heaps and clumps and clods of stones, pulling away as the trunk comes up, followed by the fat tendrils of roots. The root structure, like another tree, turned upside down and shoved into the soil. Isn't that how Dr. Geffard might have described it? The ramparts crumbling, streets leaking away, block-long mansions falling like toys. Slowly, gratefully, the world settles. From outside comes a light, tinkling, fragments of glass, perhaps falling into the streets. It sounds both beautiful and strange, as though gemstones were raining from the sky. Wherever her great-uncle is, could he have survived this? Could anyone? Has she? The house creaks, drips, groans. Then comes a sound like wind in tall grass, only hungrier. It pulls at the curtains at the delicate parts inside her ears. She smells smoke and knows fire. The glass has shattered out of her bedroom window, and what she hears is the sound of something burning beyond the shutters, something huge. The neighborhood, the entire town. The wall, floor, and underside of her bed remain cool. The house is not yet in flames, but for how long? Calm yourself, she thinks. Concentrate on filling your lungs, draining them, filling them again. She stays under her bed. She says, "Ce n'est pas la réalité." Hotel of Bees. What does he remember? He saw the engineer Bernd close the cellar door and sit on the stairs. He saw gigantic Frank Volkheimer in the golden armchair pick at something on his trousers. Then the ceiling bulb blinked out, and Volkheimer switched on his field light, and a roar leaped down upon them, a sound so loud it was like a weapon itself, consuming everything, quaking the very crust of the earth. And for an instant, all Werner could see was Volkheimer's light go skittering away like a frightened beetle. They were thrown. For an instant or an hour or a day, who could guess how long, Werner was back in Zollverein, standing above a grave a miner had dug for 2 mules at the edge of a field. And it was winter, and Werner was no older than 5, and the skin of the mules had grown nearly translucent, so that now their bones were hazily visible inside, and little clods of dirt were stuck to their open eyes, and he was hungry enough to wonder if there was anything left on them worth eating. He heard the blade of the shovel strike pebbles. He heard his sister inhale. Then, as though some retaining cord had reached its limit, something yanked him back into the cellar beneath the Hotel of Bees. The floor has stopped shaking, but the sound has not diminished. He clamps his palm to his right ear. The roar remains, the buzzing of 1,000 bees very close. Is there noise, he asks, but cannot hear himself ask it. The left side of his face is wet. The headphones he was wearing are gone. Where's the workbench? Where's the radio? Where are the weights on top of him? From his shoulders, chest, and hair, he plucks hot pieces of stone and wood. Find the field light, check on the others, check on the radio, check on the exit, figure out what has gone wrong with his hearing. These are the rational steps. He tries to sit up, but the ceiling has become lower and he strikes his head. Heat, getting hotter. He thinks, we are locked inside a box, and the box has been pitched into the mouth of a volcano. Seconds pass, maybe there are minutes. Werner stays on his knees. Light. Then the others, then the exit. Then his hearing. Probably the Luftwaffe men upstairs are already scrambling through wreckage to help. But he cannot find his field light. He cannot even stand up. In the absolute blackness, his vision is webbed with 1,000 traveling wisps of red and blue. Flames? Phantoms? They lick along the floor, then rise to the ceiling, glowing strangely, serenely. Are we dead? He shouts into the dark. Have we died? Down 6 flights. The roar of the bombers has hardly faded when the artillery shell whistles over the house and makes a dull crash as it explodes not far away. Objects patter onto the roof. Shell fragments? Cinders? And Marila says aloud, "You are too high in the house," and forces herself out from beneath the bed. Already she has lingered too long. She returns the stone inside the model house and restores the wooden panels that make up its roof and twists the chimney back into place and puts the house into the pocket of her dress. Where are her shoes? She crawls around on the floor, but her fingers feel only bits of wood and what might be shards of window glass. She finds her cane and goes in her stocking feet out the door and down the hall. The smell of smoke is stronger out here. The floor still cool, walls still cool. She relieves herself in the 6th floor toilet and checks her instinct to flush, knowing the toilet will not refill, and double-checks the air to make sure it does not feel warm before continuing. 6 paces to the stairwell. A second shell screeches overhead and Marila shrieks, and the chandelier above her head chimes as the shell detonates somewhere across the estuary. Rain of bricks, rain of pebbles, slower shower of soot. 8 curving stairs to the bottom. The 2nd and 5th steps creak. Pivot around the newel, 8 more stairs. 4th floor, 3rd. Here she checks the tripwire her great-uncle built beneath the telephone table on the landing. The bell is suspended, and the wire remains taut, running vertically through the hole he has drilled in the wall. No one has come or gone. 8 paces down the hall into the 3rd floor bathroom. The bathtub is full. Things float in it, flakes of ceiling plaster maybe, and there's grit on the floor beneath her knees, but she puts her lips to its surface and drinks her fill as much as she can. Back to the stairwell and down to the 2nd floor, then the 1st. Grapevines carved into the banister. The coat rack has toppled over. Fragments of something sharp are in the hall. Crockery. She decides, from the hutch in the dining room, and she steps as lightly as she can. Down here, some of the windows must have blown out as well. She smells more smoke. Her great-uncle's wool coat hangs from the hook in the foyer. She puts it on. No sign of her shoes here, either. What has she done with them? The kitchen is a welter of fallen shelves and pots. A cookbook lies face down in her path, like a shotgun bird. In the cupboard, she finds a half loaf of bread and what's left from the day before. Here in the center of the floor, the cellar door with its metal ring. She slides aside the small dining table and heaves open the hatch. Home of mice and damp and the stink of stranded shellfish, as if a huge tide swept in decades ago and took its time draining away. Marilar hesitates over the open door, smelling the fires from outside and the clammy, almost opposite smell washing up from the bottom. Smoke. Her great-uncle says it is a suspension of particles, billions of drifting carbon molecules, bits of living rooms, cafes, trees, people. A third artillery shell screams toward the city from the east. Again, Marie-La feels for the model house in the pocket of her dress. Then she takes the bread and her cane and starts down the ladder and pulls the trapdoor shut. Trapped. A light emerges, a light not kindled. Werner prays, by his own imagination, an amber beam wandering the dust. A light emerges, a light not kindled, Werner prays, by his own imagination, an amber beam wandering the dust. It shuttles across debris, illuminates a fallen hunk of wall, lights up a twisted piece of shelving. It roves over a pair of metal cabinets that have been warped and mauled as if a giant hand has reached down and torn each in half. It shines on spilled toolboxes and broken pegboards and a dozen unbroken jars full of screws and nails. Volkheimer. He has his field light and is swinging its beam repeatedly over a welter of compacted wreckage on the front corner, stones and cement and splintered wood. It takes Werner a moment to realize that this is the stairwell, what is left of the stairwell. That whole corner of the cellar is gone. The light hovers there another moment, as if allowing Werner to absorb their situation, then veers to the right and wobbles towards something nearby. And in the reflected light, through skeins of dust, Werner can see the huge silhouette of Volkheimer ducking and stumbling as he moves between hanging rebar and pipes. Finally, the light settles. With the flashlight in his mouth, in those granular, high-slung shadows, Volkheimer lifts pieces of brick and mortar and plaster, chunk after chunk, shredded boards and slabs of stucco. There's something beneath all of this, Werner sees. Buried under these heavy things, a form coming into shape. The engineer, Bernd. Bernd's face is white with dust, but his eyes are two voids and his mouth is a maroon hole. Though Bernd is screaming through the serrated roar lodged in his ears, Werner cannot hear him. Volkheimer lifts the engineer, the older man like a child in the staff sergeant's arms. The field light gripped in Volkheimer's teeth and crosses the ruined space with him, ducking again to avoid the hanging ceiling, and sets him in the golden armchair still upright in the corner, now powdered white. Volkheimer puts his big hand on Bernard's jaw and gently closes the man's mouth. Werner, only a few feet away, hears no change in the air. The structure around them gives off another tremor, and hot dust cascades everywhere. Soon Volkheimer's light is making a circuit of what is left of the roof. The 3 huge wooden beams have cracked, but none has given way entirely. Behind them, the stucco is spider-webbed, and pipes poke through in 2 places. The light veers behind him and illuminates the capsized workbench, the crushed case of their radio. Finally, it finds Werner. He raises a palm to block it. Volkheimer approaches, his big, solicitous face presses close. Broad, familiar, deep-sunk eyes beneath the helmet, high cheekbones, and long nose flared at the tip like the knobs at the bottom of a femur. Chin like a continent. With slow care, Volkheimer touches Werner's cheek. His fingertip comes away red. Werner says, "We have to get out. We have to find another way out." "Out?" say Volkheimer's lips. He shakes his head. There's no other way out. Book 3, June 1940. Chateau. 2 days after fleeing Paris, Marie-La and her father enter the town of Évreux. Restaurants are either boarded up or thronged. Two women in evening gowns hunch hip to hip on the cathedral steps. A man lies face down between market stalls, unconscious or worse. No mail service. Telegraph lines down. The most recent newspaper is 36 hours old. At the prefecture, a queue for gasoline coupons snakes out the door and around the block. The first two hotels are full. The third will not unlock the door, so every so often the locksmith catches himself glancing over his shoulder. "Papa?" Marie-Laure is mumbling, bewildered. "My feet." He lights a cigarette, 3 left. "Not much further now, Marie." On the western edge of Évreux, the road empties and the countryside levels out. He checks and rechecks the address. The director has given him Monsieur François Ginot, 9 Rue Saint-Nicolas. But Monsieur Ganot's house, when they reach it, is on fire. In the windless dusk, sullen heaps of smoke pump upward through the trees. A car has crashed into the corner of the gatehouse and torn the gates off its hinges. The house, or what remains of it, is grand. 20 French windows in the facade, big, freshly painted shutters, manicured hedges out front. Un château. "I smell smoke, Papa." He leads Marie-Laure up the gravel. His rucksack, or perhaps it is the stone deep inside, seem to grow heavier with each step. No puddles gleam in the gravel. No fire brigade swarms out front. Twin urns are toppled on the front steps. A burst chandelier sprawls across the entry stairs. "What is burning, Papa?" A boy comes toward them out of the smoky twilight, no older than Marie-Laure, streaked with ash, pushing a wheeled dining cart through the gravel. Silver tongs and spoons hanging from the cart chime and clank, and the wheels clatter and wallow. A little polished cherub grins at each corner. The locksmith says, "Is this the house of François Ginot?" The boy acknowledges neither question nor questioner as he passes. "Do you know what happened to—" The clanging of the cart recedes. Marie-Laure yanks the hem of his coat. "Papa, please." In her coat, against the black trees, her face looks paler and more frightened than he's ever seen it. Has he ever asked so much of her? "A house has burned, Marie. People are stealing things." "What house?" "The house we have come so far to reach." Over her head, he can see the smoldering remains of door frames glow and fade with the passage of the breeze. A hole in the roof frames the darkening sky. 2 more boys emerge from the soot, carrying a portrait in a gilded frame, twice as tall as they are, the visage of some long-dead great-grandfather, glowering at the night. The locksmith holds up his palms to delay them. "Was it airplanes?" One says, "There's plenty more inside." The canvas of the painting ripples. "Do you know the whereabouts of Monsieur Ginot?" The others say, "Ran off yesterday with the rest, London." "Don't tell him anything," says the first. The boys jog down the driveway with their prize and are swallowed by the gloom. "London?" whispers Marie-Laure. "The friend of the director is in London?" Sheets of blackened paper scuttle past their feet. Shadows whisper in the trees. A ruptured melon lolls in the drive like an amputated head. The locksmith is seeing too much. All day, mile after mile, he let himself imagine that they would be greeted with food, little potatoes with hot cores into which he and Marie-Laure would plunge forkfuls of butter, shallots and mushrooms and hard-boiled eggs and bechamel, coffee and cigarettes. He would hand Monsieur Ginot the stone, and Ginot would pull brass lorgnier out of his breast pocket and fit their lenses over his calm eye and tell him real or fake. Then Junot would bury it in the garden or conceal it behind a hidden panel somewhere in his walls, and that would be that. Duty fulfilled. Je ne m'en occupe plus. They would be given a private room, take baths. Maybe someone would wash their clothes. Maybe Monsieur Junot would tell them humorous stories about his friend, the director. And in the morning, the birds would sing, and a fresh newspaper would announce the end of the invasion. Reasonable concessions. He would go back to the Keep Hound, spend his evenings installing little sash windows in little wooden houses. Bonjour, bonjour, everything as before. But nothing is as before. The trees seethe and the house smolders, and standing in the gravel of the driveway, the daylight nearly finished, the locksmith has an unsettling thought. Someone might be coming for us. Someone might know what I carry. He leads Marie-La back to the road at a trot. Papa, my feet. He swings the rucksack around to his front and wraps her arms around his neck and carries her on his back. They pass the smashed gatehouse and the crashed car and turn not east toward the center of Hérault, but west. Figures bicycle past, pinched faces streaked with suspicion or fear or both. Perhaps it is the locksmith's own eyes that have been streaked. Not so quickly, begs Marie-La. They rest in weeds 20 paces off the road. There is only plunging night and owls calling from the trees and bats, straining insects above a roadside ditch. A diamond, the locksmith reminds himself, is only a piece of carbon compressed in the bowels of the earth for eons and driven to the surface in a volcanic pipe. Someone facets it, someone polishes it. It can harbor a curse no more than a leaf can, or a mirror, or a life. There is only chance in this world, chance and physics. Anyway, what he carries is nothing more than a piece of glass, a diversion. Behind him, over Évreux, a wall of clouds ignites once, twice. Lightning? On the road ahead, he can make out several acres of uncut hay and the gentle profiles of unlit farm buildings, a house and barn, no movement. Marie, I see a hotel. You said the hotels were full. This one looks friendly. Come, it's not far. Again, he carries his daughter. One more half mile. The windows of the house stay unlit as they approach. Its barn sits 100 yards beyond. He tries to listen above the rush of blood in his ears. No dogs, no torches. Probably the farmers too have fled. He sets Marie-La in front of the barn doors and knocks softly and waits and knocks again. The padlock is a brand new single latch Berguet. With his tools, he picks it easily. Inside are oats and water buckets and horseflies flying sleepy loops, but no horses. He opens the stall and helps Marie-La into the corner and pulls off her shoes. Voila, he says. One of the guests has just brought his horses into the lobby, so it may smell for a moment. But now the porters are hurrying him out. See where he goes? Goodbye, goodbye, horse. Go to sleep in the stables, please. Her expression is far away, lost. A vegetable garden waits behind the house. In the dimness, he can make out roses, leeks, lettuces, strawberries, most still green, tender white carrots with black earth clotted in their fibers. Nothing stirs. No farmer materializes in a window with a rifle. The locksmith brings back a shirt full of vegetables and fills a tin bucket at a spigot and eases shut the barn door and feeds his daughter in the dark. Then he folds his coat, lays her head on it, and wipes her face with his shirt. 2 cigarettes left. Inhale, exhale. Walk the paths of logic. Every outcome has its cause, and every predicament has its solution. Every lock its key. You can go back to Paris, or you can stay here, or you can go on. From outside comes the soft hooting of owls, distant grumbling of thunder or ordnance, or both. He says, "This hotel is very cheap, ma chérie. The innkeeper behind the desk said our room was 40 francs a night, but only 20 francs if we made our own bed." He listened to her breathe. So I said, "Oh, we can make our own bed." And he said, "Right, I'll get you some nails and wood." Marie-La does not smile. "Now we go find Etienne, Uncle Etienne?" "Yes, Marie, who is 76% crazy. He was with your grandfather, his brother, when he died in the war. Got a bit of gas in the head is how they used to say it. Afterward, he saw things." "What kind of things?" Creaking rumble of thunder closer now. The barn quakes lightly. "Things that were not there." Spiders draw their webs between rafters. Moths flap against the windows. It starts to rain.